So I'm Charles Kariuki. I've been in the energy industry for quite a number of years. Worked with Thika Power as EPC construction, commissioning and operation. So I've quite interacted with the energy supply side, the regulators, and I now allow these gentlemen to introduce themselves. We'll start with Engineer Anthony Musyoka.
Thank you very much. As you have heard, my name is Engineer Anthony Musyoka. I've been in the energy sector, I think, since I left college. So that's many years ago. I've worked in KPLC for more than 20 years. Then after that, I moved to KETRAC when it was formed, and I've been there currently. I'm the general manager in charge of planning and development. I think I'll stop there, then we'll talk more in terms of the space when we come to the questions.
Thank you. My name is Clément Martineau, French national. I've been in the country for 13 years now. And I developed a data center on Mombasa Road near City Cabañas. It's potentially the biggest data center in the region. A data center is sounds quite technical, but it's no more than a big warehouse with a lot of power and cooling. And the clients are usually internet companies, clouds, banks, etc. that are in need of server space. So we are the biggest data center, or the largest, and as we are growing, we will need potentially good solutions in terms of wheeling. So this is why I'm here today and delighted to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Sandra Banda. I have been in the sector since I left college as well, but not 20 years ago. But I have been across each sector of the sector. So in FMCG, in startup, in academia, and now I'm at GIZ, which is the German Development Corporation. We are international. It's an international development agency that is part of the German government, and we mainly provide technical assistance facility to clients like you, looking at some of the problems that, or some of the challenges that can be solved in the sector. So I serve as a technical advisor on green hydrogen and renewable energy projects. Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eng.Nickson Bukachi. I hear people are saying how long they've been in the sector, but then I've been in the energy space for the last 12 years. Initially with the energy regulator in Kenya, so partly involved in the development of some of the regulations that we'll be discussing today. But then I moved on to African Union, where currently I lead the renewable energy policy development or support to the African Union member states, and also do some support to local players in terms of developing some of their projects, advising on retail. People want to get into the retail market, and also people are involved in the C&I sector in Kenya. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sichei, Chemwotei. I've been in the energy sector from 2008. I started working with KenGen in generation capacity, but now I work with a company, an IPP called Mumbi Limited. Let me just say a little bit about Mumbi Limited. Mumbi Limited is an IPP developing a geothermal project in Elementaita. And together with that, Mumbi Limited is a special economic zone developer that was licensed a year ago. So we are integrating the geothermal energy together with the SEZ occupation, so that the occupiers or the operators within the SEZ can utilize the green energy that we generate within our concession. Thank you.
So we will start with Anthony. What is the latest on electricity market, bulk supply and open access regulations 2024?
Thank you very much. In Before I actually delve into that question, I think it's good that I take you back a bit so that you can know the players who will be involved. And this journey started a long time ago. If you remember 1996, that time we only had KPLC, and KPLC was in charge of generation, both transmission, distribution, and retail. And I think that's the first time the unbundling started. That's the time we had shortages in terms of generation. So we unbundled and we got KenGen plus KPLC, and also now independent power producers. So that was the first stage. Then fast forward to 2008, I think the government also saw the space in terms of transmission lines was also not going as fast as the generation. So at that time again, both KETRACO, which is Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, and GDC, they came into the space in 2008. And Kenya Electricity Transmission Company, what it does is like a transport company. It basically takes the generated power and brings it to the load centers, and KPLC goes further from there to distribute it. So now you had more players in the sector, and it will tie up with where we are going. Then in 2019, that's the Energy Act. There are three things which happened. One, it allowed for licensing of other transmission companies, which means it cannot be only KPLC or KETRACO. You can have independent, what we call IPTs. So they became players. Secondly, it also saw the need to delink KPLC from being the system controller, because the system controller is in charge of everything. And being in retail, in charge of customers, it was felt that there's some conflict of interest. So in 2019 also, KETRACO has been designated as the system operator, but the transition is still ongoing. Then again, open access was also implemented in the same, so 2019 Energy Act. So you can see all this is a journey, and what you are leading to is kind of unbundling so that you can actually have a market competition. Now, the next was to come up with the regulations. I know you'll talk more about that, but basically, these are the rules and everything which is supposed to regulate open access. And currently, I know that they're at the final stage at the ministry. I know the draft, they are going just through it. From there, it will go to the Attorney General. Once the Attorney General gives the opinion, then it's supposed to go back to Parliament. And once they finalize, then it will become, to be ratified. So I think that's where we are. And that was the question.
My seniors answered the question in terms of the status. Yes, it's true. The regulation has been developed, now being looked at keenly at the ministry to see how best to have it enacted. But the key thing that I got that the sector is trying to do is the visioning stage in terms of, yes, we'll have these open access regulations. They do allow in law many players to come in to play a role. But then the question is, how do we move from the current state that we are in to where we want to be? And in this case, the main question is, and I know maybe engineer will speak to that, is where do we want to be in 20 years from now? Because I know when people hear there's net metering regulations, there's open access, we really get excited from the private sector and also feel like these regulations should have been in place like last year so that we start implementing. But then from the government has a responsibility, in this case, first to draw a roadmap on how to transition the current power system from what we have now, manage the assets, manage the players, manage the consumers to what we want to be in future. And all of us would agree maybe in 20 years, I don't know if I speak 20 years, people will say I'm very pessimistic, but in 20 years, I should be able to choose my provider, I should be able to change my tariff, I should be able to do all these things that we do with the network. Today, if I'm not happy with Safaricom, I'll go to Airtel and go back again to Safaricom, depending on what they are offering. So that's what we want to have in future. But then, of course, the sector has a responsibility, both public and private, to see how we transition the current players from where we are to where we want to be in that future. So that process actually is what is going on. I know there is support from the Danish government to try and support us, because they're already there, to move through those phases to attain what we want to achieve.
Thank you, Engineer. The other question will go to Sichei. You are developing a project and a special economic zone, and how do you see these regulations helping you, assisting you in your endeavors? I'm very sorry to hear Bukachi, maybe he has broken a few hearts talking of 20 years, but we have to be real about how quick can such drastic changes come into fruition. So if we are to operationalize the wheeling regulations, let me call them that because most people go by that name, how would that affect your business? How do you see yourself benefiting from it as a potential generator?
The wheeling regulations is a very interesting regulation, especially for IPPs and developers. And for us, Mumbi, especially because we are developing the special economic zone. We anticipate that in the next 10 years, we shall be consuming within the special economic zone more than 500 megawatts. Mumbi itself is planning to generate 140 megawatts in the next 8 years. That tells you that we have a deficit of almost 360 megawatts. We've started talking to other developers so that we can find a way, if they'll be able to develop their energy, we can be able to wheel it to Elementator. So we are expecting the regulation that has been developed will be in place, will be actualized. Then it will be beneficial not only to Mumbi, but even the people that will be developing within the special economic zone. All of us know the benefits of the special economic zone already. As we speak, there are 5 developers that are setting up within Elementator. Some of them have set up solar power plants because we have not started generating yet. But this will be beneficial for them and for us and also for the country. Thank you.
Thank you. So we just to tie everything up, we would like to ask Clément. Clément, you have a facility that's highly dependent on the reliability of energy. I understand your business is more of real estate. You're telling people you'll never have blackouts. So how do you see yourself benefiting from the wheeling regulations if they are operationalized?
Yeah, so also to take you back a little bit, when I started this project, that was roughly, so it took me, we've been operational for 18 months and it took me 2.5 years to build. So 4 years ago, I was breaking ground and it took me, prior to that, 2 years-ish to get the funding, get the right piece of land and do the designs and all that. So that's almost 6 years ago that I started this project. And 6 years ago, potentially there was much more power availability than what we have today in terms of especially generation. And yeah, 6 years ago, Kenya was really ideal for data centers because there was so much geothermal production, etc. And today, 6 years after, we realize that we're getting quite short. And so my clients are potentially good, big cloud providers, the likes of Google, Microsoft, and you know them, all of them. There are not so many, but those guys are experts and they actually know Kenya almost better than me, or as good as potentially some of the engineers here. And they know that we are quite in a difficult situation at the moment where we don't have a lot of surplus and we, on the other hand, importing a bit of power from neighboring countries. And it's not working perfectly. We kind of have some load shadings here and there. So to your questions and potentially to what you're saying, CJ, is that yes, ideally, if we had wheeling in place, we could get good quality partners that are producing power in Elementator or around Nairobi at least, and wheel it back to Nairobi at fair prices. So that will help me a lot to A, get much more power in my facility, and 2, it will be also a good pitch for me to go and pitch those clients and say, look, Kenya is playing ball. We have now the right generation, the right systems in place. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about AI at the moment. It's a big topic. And we believe that if we had good, willing systems in place, a bit more power generation, it would be easier for us to convince those cloud or hyperscalers, as we call them, to bring some of their AI model into this part of the world, where land is available, because there are some countries where finding good real estate is quite hard and very expensive. So Kenya is quite affordable if you slightly outside Nairobi. 2, we have a lot of talented labor. So I have engineers in my facility. They are as good, if not better, than some engineers in France, London, Brussels. They're costing me, I'm talking to my peers in Brussels, and one engineer cost him 25,000 euros equivalent a month, all in all. While if I spend $2,000-3,000 equivalent in shillings, say 300,000-400,000 shillings for a very good engineer, it's A, the engineer is happy, and 2, I have very good staffing. So Kenya is a great location for real estate, staffing, and 2 and 3, power is green, very reliable, because KETRACO is also doing a good job. Kenya Power as well for the last mile distribution. So we have a very stable power, at least in Nairobi. So yeah, having more power will help me to convince more clients to come to this part of the world.
Thank you. Sandra is the neutral party for us. And my question to you would be, as someone who is looking at us doing all these things that you're talking about, from your perspective, how would operationalizing of the regulations affect the C&I market?
I think, as my fellow panelists have quite mentioned, it will open up the market, first of all, for competition. And with competition, there is possibility of efficiency, improvement of efficiency, using less power to do more, and opening up the markets could also, price signals could also eventually, if we get to the 20 years that Bukachi is talking about, and I think Engineer Joel mentioned in the morning, even in 20 years, we won't industrialize, but we're still hopeful that price signals could possibly indicate that C&I could end up even being a cheaper option if these willing regulations are operationalized. So there's that opportunity for us to widen the market in terms of what we are able to do, allow us to venture into more economical growth activities for the country, and also just open up more players for the country, open up more businesses for the country. Clément is just mentioning about how affordable our stuff is. Maybe we can get to the France rates if we are just growing our economy. But there's just in terms, because I'm passionate about industrialization and growth of industrialization in Kenya. I think like that's a major opportunity for us with willing charges, and even with emerging technologies like green hydrogen. Once these regulations are operationalized, it will allow for us to explore adoption of such technologies in the country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So as I promised, we are done with the first round, and to reward you for visiting this, for being our audience, it's now your opportunity to ask questions. You can appoint any of the panelists to answer. And let's try and make this engaging, and let's learn as much as possible from this free consultancy. So someone, I will appoint George. George, you have the first question, and pass the mic to the other person.
I did visit the IX Africa data center. I think there's plans, I think, to do something in Limuru, if I got it right. What sort of things do you expect from the electricity side for you to be able to be, I think you call it tier 4 data center or something? What could we do on the side of power generation and supply to enable you to kind of maximize on your business model? And in that case also, you consume a lot of power. If you expand, you'll consume even a lot more, which means we'll have a bigger market for the power that we generate on our end.
My name is Norman Nwanyere from Gulf Power. Now, I have a question for the gentleman from Ketrako. Is Kenya Power psychologically prepared for this open access? I'm asking this because recently when Ketrako was taking over system operations, it didn't go down without a fight. Now we are talking about trying to get into a space that KPLC has the monopoly. Of course, we do understand that Kenya Power may need protection because they have running purchase agreements. So how do we plan to handle some of these challenges that we are likely to face when we start the implementation of the open access, or rather the wheeling? Another thing is, with some of the inherent system instabilities, when when a CNI entity is wheeling to a customer in a remote place that you are affected by these instabilities, how do you intend to handle some of these issues that definitely will come out?
I have a concern around the regulations, because today we have the Energy Act 2019, but it seems that putting up the regulations takes time. For instance, this open access has taken almost 6 years. I don't know, why does it take all this time?
My question will go to Nickson. Just curious with regards to what you've seen in other African markets in terms of competitive markets, and how if there's an African country that has successfully implemented open access. I know with regards to the timelines, your former colleague stated that they are creating guidelines just to see how the bulk supply, the open market and electricity market, the open access and the electricity market regulations will play out. So just curious with regards to, is there an African country that we could study from in terms of creating a successful competitive market? Thank you.
My name is Mwendwa Eunice from Hutukas. And the question pertaining, as we discuss more on the grid connectivity. So my question actually would go to the Ketrako team, or like any regulator thereby. We're talking about the grid connectivity. And I know sometimes maybe we've experienced what I would call a transmission congestion, where people are supposed to feed, but maybe the capacity is not aligned at that moment. So in that scenario where we have like IPPs producing power, where we have these solar plants where we are all bringing this power to the grid, are we prepared for that in terms of the transmission lines? Are we able to have the IPP do the transmission? Like, what is the framework around that to enable this to be a good transition? Thank you.
I'd like to rephrase the question that I asked in the morning differently, for the purposes of getting appropriate feedback. With respect to open access and the impact on the cost of electricity in this country. So one of the components that you all know will be at play is the wheeling tariff. We know today that there is a transaction between KenGen and Ketrako with respect to the cost of transmission that applies. Do we see this playing out for the rest of the market, or we expect a different structure? And how do you expect this to impact the cost of electricity in this country? So let me organize them. So the first one from Norman about the psychological preparation of the off-taker to wheeling regulations, and also how the impact of instabilities, the current instabilities we have on the grid, and how that will play into if wheeling was to be operationalized today, how does it, all those factors, instabilities, the willingness of the off-taker, how do they tie up?
Thank you very much. I think it's difficult for me to know whether KPLC is psychologically prepared. But it's a very valid question, because I've been in the sector, and some of the issues you have raised are actually true, where even moving the national control has been having quite some challenges. So what you're saying is true. And we don't expect KPLC to give up without a fight. But all that said and done, we have been having a lot of discussion in the sector that EPRA must be able to bring every player into book. They have to do that. There is no alternative. It's not whether Ketraco wants it. It's not whether KPLC wants it. It's not whether Kengen wants it. Once it has been put in the act, then it has to be made good. And I think that's where I would say that maybe EPRA needs to flex their muscles more. And KPLC will adapt. If you talk to Kengen, they are very happy. They don't mind. They would like willing because they'll also benefit from it. And sometimes when an idea has come, it can't be stopped. This is an idea for efficiency. This is an idea of a possibility of the industries lowering their costs, because they will be given that option of choosing and negotiating. So it's an idea which is due, and it's up to EPRA to make sure that they flex their muscles. Otherwise, even if we are KPLC, I will try to hold on to it. So that's only natural, but I would say that EPRA should flex their muscles on that. Now, in terms of stability, it's a very long question, that one, because since Ketraco was formed, I think 2008, if you check the transmission lines, approximately it was around 4,000 kilometers. Right now it's tending to 10,000. In the next 20 years, we are planning to get another 10,000 on board. And the idea is that we have been having very long distribution lines, and these distribution lines are quite unstable. And the idea is to shorten them. What the transmission line does, because most of the interruptions are not in transmission. And if they're in transmission, most of the time because it's a national blackout. So you'll find that transmission lines operate at an average worldwide, and in Kenya, it's around 98%. That's quite high. And one of the things we are trying to do is to ensure that on top of expanding the network, we are trying to create redundancy, because faults will occur, but a fault should not be able to have a problem to the customer. So we are trying to have a redundancy within Nairobi. One of the things we are trying to do, and which has been delayed, is to have a ring round Nairobi. And what that means is that even if one area goes off, supply can come from another area. So that is key for Ketraco. And once we minimize also the distribution lines, we lower the losses, and it is easier for KPLC. It becomes much easier to have that stability. But yes, there are still some places which are far from the network. And according to me, those are areas which we just have to keep on progressing bit by bit. Just to add something, I think Clément said something very important, because I'm in that space. I know we have been having a lot of inquiries in terms of power for data centers, and they consume a lot. Most of them, when they come, they ask for a lot of power. And this is an area which currently, like he says, we are a bit constrained in terms of generation. That's not a lie. I think it's true. Initially, maybe 2 years ago, we had a lot of generation, but it goes in cycles. That sometimes you have a lot of generation, people complain it's expensive because there's too much generation. Then again, load catches up. So it's a continuous cycle. And we expect by 2026, 2027, 2028 there's a lot of geothermal plants which are supposed to come in, some by Kengen, and also GDC in Paka and that area of Baringo. So the plants are there. The only unfortunate thing is that when these data centers want to come now, it is that part of the cycle where the generation is stretched with the load. So it's an area which we have taken seriously, because it's not only the data centers. Somebody else mentioned about hydrogen, very heavy consumers of electricity. So we no longer have the normal organic growth. We are actually having things like this. Even planning is becoming difficult. We have to now anticipate that, unlike before when we could forecast this way, we'll have things which are going like this, and there's more room for error. So these are things we are taking into consideration, and we know we even discussed with AFD. We wanted a consultant to come, we discuss in terms of this load forecasting, how now we try to simulate what's happening elsewhere, because we have been simulating an organic growth, which is much easier. But now that's not the case. So that's one of the areas we are also looking into.
Okay, you can pass the mic to Clément. There was
Still another question, maybe I could have finished.
No. So, George Aluru asked a question on what sort of things do you need for your operations? Those are the requirements, the tires. He also hinted about the new project in Tilisi, challenges with having one substation. If I got it right, the one in Mombasa Road, you have 2 substations feeding in. So maybe you can hint on that, on the redundancies, and also clarify what is it that you need for you to be classified as X.
Thank you. So it's actually a good transition because my question, thank you, when I say it touches a bit to what Engineer Anthony just explained, which is, so yes, we need more power to do more projects. It's always a bit of the cart and the horses, right? And we need the horses before we can have this cart moving forward. And yes, I guess it's quite complicated for you to cater for such demand, because we are looking at projects at the moment where they are asking us to do 250 megawatt of IT load, which is the server's power. So if you add the cooling and some auxiliary systems, you're talking 300, 350 megawatt. And if I bring a data center, a client like that tomorrow to wherever in Nairobi, is going to be quite a stretch to the network. So yeah, what I need is actually that we make it happen, in the sense that we've been talking to this wheeling regulation for a while. I think even 10, 12 years ago, there was some discussions already. Even before EPRA was called EPRA, it was called the regulator. I forgot the name. Anyway, but yeah, what we would need is to make it happen, so then it gives confidence to potential investors and clients. And usually, yes, data centers are pretty good clients, I'd say, because we're consuming H24 and we have a constant load as well. So potentially, as much as it's a lot of demand, then once we hear and once we consume, it's H24, 7 days a week, Christmas, holidays. There is no more days where we're not consuming. So as much as, yes, there is some drawbacks on the peaks, the sudden demand, then we're there. So I'm looking at the notes. So yes, ideally that'd be great. And what could be also discussed is having some sort of a special tariffs, potentially, something for huge consumers. I know the biggest consumers usually in Kenya are the cement factories. They're in the likes of 20, 30, 50, 80 megawatt potentially with Bamboi, I heard. But we could be as big, if not bigger, if we had the solutions. And tariffs potentially could help us as well. And then on the, yes, Tilisi. So Tilisi is an industrial site on the west of Nairobi, which is quite well located, slightly, especially for us, because we are on Mombasa Road near the airport or close to the airport. So having a second site that will be 40, 50 kilometers away from the first site could be great. Especially for redundancy. Some clients will need to put some of their machines in 2 data centers, so ideally with the same company. And TDC is great, even though they sold most part of their, and I'm not doing the pitch for them, but I think they sold most part of their plots for industrials, but the one I've booked. And I think the problem is also that now they're catching up a bit with power installations, because I don't think they have had they planned the substation to get power. So I think they have only 11 kV lines and they're getting 66. So for us, it delays us a little bit as well. They have kind of the same problems that potentially Ketraco, which is how do we plan the growth of the clients? And actually they have exactly the same problem that what you mentioned. I think they have some big factories doing plastic and all that, and they have to bring 2, 3, 5 megawatts in the next 6 months. And I think they're going to struggle for that. So yes, we're looking at TDC to expand. We're looking at other sites as well, where power could be a bit at higher voltage, call it 100 plus kV kV, 220, potentially even 400 if we were closer to some of the main hubs. And instead of dealing with Kenya Power, we could potentially just get power straight from the main power stations, Isinya or on the other side, Suswa potentially. Even though Suswa has quite a lot of issues with the geothermal gas that are emitted in the air when it rains, it's quite toxic. It's also quite seismic. Anyway, but those are the data center concerns. And maybe to your last point, it's true that, without getting too much into detail, but data centers are some classifications, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4 being potentially the top. Data center tier 4 requires two utility contracts. So it would mean if I wanted to be tier 4 that I would need to have a contract with Kenya Power and with Element Data Power, whoever, Tika Power, to get the tier 4 certification. There's much more than that because it necessitates a lot of equipment downstream as well, but that potentially makes Kenya not available for tier 4 data centers due to the fact that there's only one utility and which has the monopoly, which is Kenya Power. Tier 4 data centers are also very expensive and actually not really, very few clients in the world are requiring that. So it's not really blocking me, but yes, if really a client wanted that, today I could not do it. I hope I replied to your question, Bonasio. Thank you.
Okay. The other question goes to Bukachi. It's from Joseph from Safaricom. It's about the regulatory turnaround times. Maybe you can hit on the challenges that make it. We had the Energy Act then in 2019, 6 years later, we're still talking about some of the regulations to operationalize the act. So what are the challenges that contribute to these long regulatory turnaround times?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, but for the regulator, I see them in the house. For the first time, I have to speak without speaking for the regulator and try to be more objective. But basically, I would start with the benefits of the regulations. And one of they have already alluded to the fact that we can get competitive pricing and everyone looks into that. We can talk about increased flexibility, of course, in terms of who gives you supply. I can change my supplier today and also have more options, and also encouraging more private sector investment. So that is when we are looking at it at country level. But then if we expand the scope and even start looking at it at regional level and the Eastern African Power Pool, we even have more benefits that we would expect from the open access narrative as opposed to when we are looking at it as a country. And for sure, it's a prerequisite that for us to get into the regional market and do away with most of the bilateral contracts that are being signed between member states, for example, Kenya and Ethiopia, Kenya, Ethiopia and Tanzania, and using Kenya and the likes, we might have to have a mechanism of compensating for the players. So that brings me directly to the question, because the first thing that we are supposed to do is to allocate the costs. And I think that's one of the things that could be a major challenge that brings about the inertia that the engineer was talking about in terms of Kenya Power, for example, not being open to it. One of which is, what is the cost of transmission? I know in the previous tariff review, we tried to segment that when we're approving that tariff. But the question that I still have, even when I was putting those numbers is it still the actual cost? So once we allocate the costs and we say this is the cost of transmission, cost of generation, cost of distribution, cost of retail, and I want to come in as another player to now do just transmission, I already know in my head what I will get as compensation. And KPLC now can have a narrative and say, I can change my business model to fully focus on distribution and retail, because I feel it has it gives me the required revenues for me to be able to operate sustainably. Most of the inertia would be when they look at their business model, they sit and ask themselves, if I let go of the control center, I let go of the transmission infrastructure, I remain with the last mile customers who do not give me sufficient revenues to be afloat. So then that becomes a reason why they push back. And then now to come directly to the turnaround, the regulator who is seated in the house now is supposed to look at it both in the short term and in the long term. So in this case, ask myself, when I open up this market space and have 20 independent power producers selling directly to the major consumers, so what happens in terms of the sustainability of providing the service to more than the 9 million customers? Because I know, and I think I've had discussions with Safaricom before when I was working with DPRA, and they wanted this open access like yesterday. But the question would be, if Safaricom moves out, Bamburi moves out, Mombasa Cement moves out, how do we sustain that sector? Because if you look at the law in itself, the spirit is both the technical and the financial credibility of the sector. And I think that's one of the things that the regulator has a lot of work to do. It's not about, in my view, considered view, them being firm to some extent, but then having that clear picture of the sector and what is the cost of each of the players and how do I allocate the costs even when a new player comes in. And that's where the market rules come in. So you'll find in some jurisdictions, for example, they will say, if you come in with the 50 megawatts during the tariff control period, you still have to pay the person who was selling you electricity for the sector to be credible. Because when they were budgeting, they budgeted for you. So they budgeted to supply you electricity for the next 3 years. And for this reason, they applied for this amount of tariff. So to me, we need more analysis to understand the sector first, especially on this aspect of open access. And once we have a clear picture of the sector, then we ask ourselves, how are we going to meet the need of each of the players and each of the consumers at the end of the day? I know when I work with EPRA and I have electricity and I have someone signing a contract with EPRA to supply electricity, at the end of the day, I will go back to my home village, right? And if KPLC is not able to supply me electricity because they are not afloat, then I will not have achieved my objective. So the key thing is to try and break down this sector and also that's why I gave a roadmap of 20 years. A roadmap of 20 years because there are various milestones. Like now, they passed the net metering regulations. Let's see how the sector behaves. But then it doesn't mean they have to wait for very long because markets always have disruptions. And there have been disruptions in Kenya, those ones who are older like me, who were born in the 1940s, you'd realize in the early 2000s, there were blackouts, right? That's where IPPs came in and we had the thermal power plants. So if we don't look into the future also as quick as possible, we will be forced by circumstances. And that's what, coming to the other question that was asked from EED, that's what is happening in South Africa. Now, there's a deficit of power. How do we meet the deficit? Bring in every player, remove all the rules, bring someone to give us power because we need power. So it means as much as we'll try to project using the normal models, we'll also have to be futuristic. And if KPLC, for example, if any player, not even KPLC, is not futuristic, because Ketraco could be comfortable now because they have the thousands of kilometers of transmission lines, but then there's been discussion to bring in other players. So that's still a disruption. When we are looking at the system operations regulations, I was of the view myself that the National Control Center should not go to Ketraco and should be open, that someone can come in and invest in that. And you never know, because the law, if I look at the law the way it is, it's possible that I could be Bukachi Limited and own the National Control Center. Who want you if the next president comes from my village and I tell them that's the only way you can make money? So it means disruptions will always happen and we have to be ready to make those disruptions. And lastly, as I conclude, so that I don't take a lot of time, I would give an example of the C&I being the context that we are talking about. When I joined EPRA in 2014, thereabout, we had a workshop. I remember very well. It was in Crown Hotel. And the workshop was discussing net metering regulations. that time the employee of KPLC came with a long list why net metering cannot work in Kenya. So of course, because of those many reasons, somehow the regulations did not move. So we continued with the sector. Slowly, the private sector started building systems for themselves. So when the net metering regulations are coming into place, already the market is fully developed. So it means we have always to look at the future. And when we look at some of these frameworks, we look at them beyond ourselves. And actually, I want to joke and say, the person who read the reasons why the regulations cannot work is now working with EPRA and is required to implement the same regulations. So it means some of these things, we have to be futuristic. And the main challenge that I see in the country is, at times, we are really cluttered with interests in terms of what we want now, my job security, the security of my organization, but we are not looking at the long-term good of the country. And that's one of the things that I think we should be looking at. Thank you.
The audience did not have a question for Clément, so I have one for him. So, Clément, what investment opportunities exist for C&I users looking to leverage on the opportunities or threats brought about by the regulations, especially for people like yourself?
Sorry, my name is Sichei. I think Clément is seated in the middle. There's something else that I want to touch on before I go to the question that he has talked about. There was a challenge in 2018 for the IPPs when there was a moratorium on PPAs, and therefore they could not continue moving. And I know in one way or the other it affected the investment on an electricity generation. It could be one of the major reasons why data centers cannot get the 300 megawatts of electricity, because the IPPs could not continue moving. Now, when we come to the question that he has asked, where can we invest? Yes, when you look at the regulation currently, when it is effectively in place, the private sector can be able to invest in the infrastructure, not only in energy development, that is investing in within the IPPs, because now you can sign a PPA not with Kenya Power, but with the off-taker, now with the data center. Now, if you can be able to sign a PPA with them, then you can be able to use the PPA to finance the project. And therefore, the private sector people can be able to invest directly in the IPPs to develop the energy that we require. At the same time, they can be able to invest in the infrastructure for the wheeling of that electricity, even from the place where it is developed to the person that is consuming. Thank you.
It's true that money might not be available to do these reinforcements. However, I know KETRACO is 100% owned by the government. If you learn from what Kenyan did some years back, you probably will have a solution to do some of those particular lines. Have you considered as a company floating shares in our stock exchange and determining how much KETRACO is worth? Because the problem is that now that you have agreed on the wheeling charge, and I'm sure you have agreed because these projects you were trying to do the other day, you must have agreed on a price, how much it will cost to wheel the power. Using that one, you can do a financial projection of what KETRACO is worth. And if you throw some of the shares in the stock market, even here in Kenya, I believe you can raise quite a lot of money to be able to do some of the projects. Not all, but some of the projects that you think are critical in this area of transmission. Because if you started this in the year 2020, I'm sure by now we would have done a few of those particular lines. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Felix. Actually, I'm a student and I have two questions. One is related to the regulatory framework. One is to ask, is there a way that we can make the regulatory period of approving projects to be shorter than what they are right now, maybe by finding a framework where we can standardize the PPAs and reduce the time, which will maybe bring investors to the country, and also to build on what engineers asked about the financials. One is there a way, because I know from my knowledge is that most of the financing that comes to the project in Kenya comes from abroad. Is it possible that we can find local financing or blended finance options, maybe by utilizing public finance from maybe pension funds or something like that?
My name is Job. I have a simple question. We are in the process of finalizing or developing bulk supply wheeling regulations. My question is, are we ready for it with regard to our infrastructure? So currently we have a lot of challenges. We are still speaking about losses, transmission. We are still speaking about how our grid needs to be expanded, the investment that needs to go into it. If the regulations were to be operationalized today, would we end up in a situation where they are not successfully implemented because of infrastructure constraints? Thanks.
As we stand now and as we move to the next step, which is everybody's feeling that's the position to be with freewheeling open access. Today we have teams or companies who have signed already PPAs, which is with the engine of prices of what they want long term, and even a KPLC has quite a number of them. So what will happen in this space after now the regulations have come in place? How is this being taken care of? Thank you.
But that notwithstanding, I couldn't agree with him more. Actually, India, power grid of India went that way almost 20 years ago. Nowadays, I think it's 51% government and 49% private shareholding. And currently, I think the last time I had a discussion with them, I think they're the third in terms of money they are making in India. So it works. Now for KETRACO, what that would mean is that initially it was not very easy because there was no really a willing tariff. There was no really a willing tariff. But with this open access and having several players in the market, that's KETRACO, you'll have independent transmission companies, then you are given kind of you have a set willing tariff. Then from that time, it makes more sense if we can go that way. But like anything else in government, like somebody said here, it can take long. But that idea is a very good idea. It has been discussed within some forums, but I think it's still not yet ready. Maybe let me say we have first to get the tariff, and then from there maybe we can move on. But it's a very good idea.
Okay, thank you. Felix, you had a question on local financing versus blended finance as part of a strategy to get local financing. So the last session we were having was on tailored financing solutions, and we have one of our sponsors, Damana. They are already doing that. So it's maybe good. I think I called the guy from Tamana. He's there. You can at least check up with him on the shorter project approvals plus standardizations. Bukachi, you want to take this?
I think it's possible, and the framework exists, and all of us know, those ones who are in the sector. One, I want to thank you for the good question. You know, when you said you're a student, I started looking around to ask what kind of students did Esak bring. Very bright. but then, yeah, but it's a good thing, and it's good that you're following the developments. And the truth is, Kenya is not mean in terms of frameworks. The Energy Act is very clear. Project approval, 60 days. We had a very good framework for FIT. But just to draw from what I said before, it's just the goodwill and the roadmap. You can have very good framework, but if some people in some quarters say we have excess energy, like what we had for 4 years, then we'll not procure any plant. it will just remain to be that an aspiration. And that's why I've always challenged the people in the sector and the people doing the least cost that maybe we should just have indicative capacities that we need every year without locking in projects. Because that has been, in my view, one of the main challenges that has made it very difficult for someone new coming in to onboard a new power plant. If you went to the least cost, I've not looked at the recent, maybe they will tell you they have projects up to 2030. So whether we have a framework of approving projects very fast, so we'll be approving for 2050. What will we be approving? So basically, it's that bigger picture that we miss, is not the law, in my view. Our laws are the most progressive. I can tell you, in the sub-Saharan Africa, maybe we could be competing with South Africa, Morocco, and the likes. But our laws are very good. They allow clear mandate who is supposed to do what. But when it comes to doing it, that's where the challenge is. And actually, recently I was reviewing a framework for regulation, and I was even seeing someone proposing if the cabinet secretary, for example, doesn't do something, you take them to the tribunal. And was asking them, how practical is it that someone who appoints me, I will be judging them for not doing an action in law? So it means, is that the goodwill that we just need to have these things moving? And it doesn't matter how many laws we actually make. If we don't have the goodwill, the capacities will not come on board. So that is my view on that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the last question we have a question from Job on grid infrastructure readiness for wheeling regulations. I think, Anthony, you had touched on that, but you can touch on it. Sandra, you prepare to answer the last question, then we'll do our parting shot.
Yes, I'll just be brief because I already touched on what we are doing. But I always believe you don't have to wait for everything to be perfect to start. Because all these challenges you are hearing, constraints, even in Europe, they get lines which have constraints, yet they are doing wheeling. So I think we should not close ourselves to wheeling because of the challenges. They can be implemented, and I know EPRA is quite determined, and I have discussions with my colleagues, and they are quite determined. They already know what they want to do, and we are going to go ahead. So let's embrace it and move ahead. The challenges will continue sorting them as we go. There's nothing which is implemented in a perfect world.